This tale begins in the sun-drenched hills of California, where the roar of heavy engines broke the usual tranquility of a highway near Aliso Canyon. Transport 411 was a heavy military supply truck, grinding its gears on a steep grade under the watchful eyes of two soldiers in uniform. The older driver, a rugged man with 30 years of service under his belt, adjusted his cap and looked at his younger partner. The young soldier smiled faintly, nursing a sore arm. He mentioned that he was considering re-enlisting when his first tour ended. The older driver chuckled, remarking that the military arm was the only steady job he had ever known, so why not make a lifelong career out of it? Suddenly, a dark van cut sharply across the front of the transport, forcing the driver to slam on the brakes with a harsh screech of rubber. Before the surprised soldiers could react, doors swung open and masked men stepped into the sunlight, their weapons drawn and gleaming menacingly. One of the hijackers, a man with cold eyes named Wayne Lockwood, barked orders for the two soldiers to step out, face the side of the road, and keep their hands where he could see them. He warned them that if they tried to turn around, they would be shot without hesitation. The young soldier, driven by duty, refused to go down without a fight. He reached for his service sidearm, trying to defend his cargo. A sharp, deafening shot rang through the canyon. The young soldier slumped to the dirt, killed instantly. A woman named Amanda, standing near the rear of the hijacker's getaway vehicle, screamed in horror. She confronted Wayne, reminding him that he had promised nobody would get hurt during the job. Wayne ignored her frantic protest, barking at his partner Leo Shinsun to start moving the crates of military hardware they had already managed to grab. The driver of the transport, risking his own life while the hijackers were distracted, scrambled back toward his dashboard radio. He keyed the mic and frantically reported to Ridgeway Base that Transport 411 was being hijacked at Aliso Canyon and that his partner was dead. Wayne heard the transmission and cursed softly. He knew that if the radio call got through to anyone, the entire area would soon be swarming with law enforcement and military police. Abandoning the rest of the crates, Wayne ordered his crew to move out immediately and meet back at their hideout. Later that afternoon, miles away on a dusty access road, a highway patrol officer held up his hand at a hastily assembled roadblock. He approached a dark vehicle carrying Wayne, Amanda, and a sickly young boy wrapped in a blanket in the back seat. The officer asked for identification, explaining that a serious robbery and murder had occurred down the line. Wayne, adopting the calm demeanor of a tired family man, presented his license under the name Mr. Lockwood. He casually mentioned that the kid in the back had a terrible cold and begged the officer not to wake him up. Amanda played along, rubbing her tired eyes and explaining that they had been up all night nursing the sick child. The officer, taking pity on the weary family, checked the rear compartment briefly and waved them through with an apology for the trouble. As soon as the roadblock faded in the rearview mirror, Amanda breathed a sigh of relief, thanking the stars they had made it through. Wayne, however, turned on her with sudden fury. He called her a fool and threatened to break her head, blaming her for not telling the motel staff to keep the boy out of the swimming pool, which had made his cold worse. Amanda fired back, shouting that when it came to his son, Jody, she could never do anything right in his eyes. Meanwhile, in downtown Los Angeles, a very different kind of reunion was taking place at the State Parole Board office. Mrs. Nesbitt, an elderly woman carrying the weight of years of heartbreak, sat anxiously in a bright office. Beside her stood Betty and J.R. Jones, a sharp young legal associate recently arrived from Chicago. The parole officer entered and handed Mrs. Nesbitt the official clearance papers. He apologized for the bureaucratic red tape, remarking that it seemed just as hard to check someone out of prison as it was to put them in. He introduced J.R. Jones as Chicago's answer to the legal profession, a man who had worked tirelessly to assist with the case. Mrs. Nesbitt wiped a tear from her eye, confessing how nervous she was. It had been 7 long years since her daughter, Julie, had run away from home with Wayne Lockwood. 7 painful years of searching, with nothing more than an occasional postcard from Taos or a commune in Arizona to prove Julie was even alive. She had lived like a nomad with that strange young man, and Mrs. Nesbitt had not even known about the birth of her grandson, Jody, until the boy was nearly a year old. She still could not understand how Wayne could rob a supermarket, abandon Julie to be arrested by the police, and flee into the night. Moments later, the heavy wooden door opened. Julie Nesbitt stepped into the room. She was wearing modest, new clothes provided by her mother. Mrs. Nesbitt rushed forward, her eyes filling with tears as she embraced her long-lost daughter. Julie looked at her mother softly, observing that the hardest part of making up after all those years was saying that very first hello. She admitted that while she had not changed much on the outside, she had finally grown up on the inside. Mrs. Nesbitt held her daughter's hands tightly, telling her that she too had changed over those 7 long years. She reminded Julie that the parole board required a permanent address and offered her home without a moment's hesitation. Julie wept quietly, stating that all she wanted in the world was to come back home. J.R. Jones smiled warmly at the emotional sight, whispering to Betty that for moments like these, a good lawyer should always carry an extra supply of handkerchiefs. Later that afternoon, at the private investigation office of Barnaby Jones, the group gathered around a large wooden desk. Mrs. Nesbitt expressed her profound gratitude to the veteran detective and his team for finding Julie, but Barnaby gently held up a hand. He noted that since they had only brought together part of the family so far, she should save her full thanks until they managed to track down her little grandson, Jody. Julie looked at Barnaby anxiously, asking if there was any trace of her son. Barnaby explained that they finally had a starting point. He asked JR to display the photographic blow-ups they had prepared. JR laid out a dozen enlarged photographs of an old pickup truck on the table. Barnaby asked Julie if she recalled when the picture had been taken. Julie studied the image and remembered that it was taken roughly 18 or 19 months ago, just before the supermarket robbery and her subsequent arrest. Barnaby pointed to the license plate on the truck. He explained that because only the numbers were clear in the old photo, the Department of Motor Vehicles could not pull up a current address. He asked Julie to think back as hard as she could to remember the letters on the plate. Julie closed her eyes, remembering the endless breakdowns they had suffered with that old vehicle. A faint smile touched her lips as she recalled how she and Wayne used to joke that the truck was cursed. She remembered the letters clearly now, JNX, like the word jinx. Across town in a crowded public park, Wayne Lockwood stood near a bench, watching the paths carefully. A sleazy, well-dressed black market broker named Griffith P. Markham, known on the streets simply as Griff, approached him with a slick smile. Wayne asked if Griff was ready to talk business regarding some heavy merchandise. Griff grinned, replying that business was his native tongue. Wayne explained that he had 36 heavy military explosive charges and 3 cases of brand-new M16 rifles. Griff calculated the numbers in his head and offered $3,500 for the lot. Wayne scoffed, calling Griff a cheapskate and demanding $4,000. He pointed out that they both knew what that kind of military hardware fetched at retail value. Griff leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. He reminded Wayne that according to the morning news, a soldier had been blown away to secure those weapons. That kind of blood on the cargo made it hot, making it much harder to turn over to a buyer. Wayne grew angry and turned to walk away. Griff quickly grabbed his arm, apologizing for the low offer and agreeing to bump the price up to $5,000. Wayne relaxed slightly, agreeing to the deal. He promised to deliver the crates to their usual drop-off spot in Chatsworth by 3 o'clock that afternoon. As Griff walked away, little Jody ran up to Wayne, clutching a half-eaten snack. Wayne grabbed the boy by the shoulder, demanding to know why he was not at the free health clinic as he had been ordered. Amanda stepped up behind the boy, explaining that Jody did not have a serious illness, just the morning sniffles, so they had decided to skip the long lines at the clinic. Wayne turned on Amanda with sudden, terrifying fury. He grabbed her arm tightly, warning her that he took no chances with his son. He yelled that he did not care how crowded the clinic was and made it clear that if she ever neglected his son's health again, he would make her pay severely. Jody tugged at his father's shirt, saying he was hungry and asking if they could get a hamburger, French fries, and a vanilla milkshake. Wayne's tone softened slightly as he looked down at his son. He patted the boy on the head and agreed to take him to a fast food drive-in. Meanwhile, Barnaby Jones tracked down a commercial photography studio near the beach. Inside, a photographer named Rudy Bates was setting up lighting for a fashion shoot involving a model with wild flowers in her hair. Barnaby walked over and showed Rudy a photograph of Wayne Lockwood. Rudy looked at the picture and took a sip of his coffee. He admitted that he had bumped into Wayne in Venice about 2 or 3 months prior while shooting on the beach, but they had only spoken for a minute, and he had no idea where Wayne was staying now. Barnaby asked if Rudy knew anyone else from the old commune days who might still be in contact with Wayne. Rudy pondered for a moment, then mentioned a guy named Leo Shinsun. He recalled that Leo used to give him rides on his motorcycle and lived at his father's place. Barnaby asked for the father's full name, but Rudy could not recall it. However, Rudy did remember one crucial detail. Leo's father worked out of Los Angeles as a railroad jack. Barnaby smiled, relying on his knowledge of old railroading jargon. He noted that a shack was the traditional term for a brakeman or conductor in charge of freight cars on a train line. Back at Barnaby's office, J.R. Jones was sitting at a desk surrounded by heavy law books, frantically studying for the upcoming bar exam. Barnaby walked in, grabbing his hat, and teased the young man by asking him an obscure legal question regarding forestry law in California. J.R. guessed that driving a nail into a saw log intended for lumber was a misdemeanor, but Barnaby corrected him with a grin, stating it was a felony under Penal Code Section 593A. Barnaby advised J.R. to stay glued to his books if he wanted to pass the bar, while Barnaby himself went out to follow up on the railroad lead. Farther out on the outskirts of the county, along Candlefoot Road near Topanga Canyon, Wayne and Leo were completing another transaction inside a secluded barn. They were meeting with an illicit dealer named Jim Rokas. Rokas handed Wayne a stack of bills for a small crate of stolen goods, telling him to give him a call if he ever got his hands on more military items. Wayne took the money, counted it quickly, and prepared to leave. Suddenly, a desperate, wild-eyed junkie burst into the barn holding a heavy revolver. The junkie demanded that everyone empty their pockets and throw their money onto the dirt floor. Rokas tried to reason with the man, explaining that they did not carry narcotics or heavy drugs. The junkie refused to listen, spotting the thick envelope of cash in Wayne's hand. He snatched the money greedily. In a moment of blind panic, the junkie pulled the trigger. A loud gunshot shattered the silence of the barn. Leo Shinsun collapsed to the floor, mortally wounded. The junkie grabbed the cash and fled into the surrounding brush. Wayne knelt beside Leo, but it was too late. His partner was dead. Amanda ran into the barn, her eyes wide with terror, shouting that the gunshot would bring people running from the nearby restaurant. She pointed out that first a soldier had been killed, and now Leo was dead, leaving them with absolutely nothing